My name is Ava Collins. I'm 39. Last night, I flew red-eye from D.C. after 3 days of bipartisan briefings, 3 pots of lukewarm Senate hallway coffee, and 1 misfired joke from a senator who mistook Taiwan for Thailand. I landed in SFO at 6:12 a.m., half dreaming of a hot shower and a desk stacked with briefing binders. But my badge didn't work. No beep, just red light. At first, I thought it was a sensor issue. Our building's tech is flashy but dumb. I tried again. Red. I walked around to the receptionist, gave my name. She tapped a few keys, blinked at the screen like it had insulted her mother, and said, "You've been removed from the system." Then her eyes flicked down, embarrassed, like she was seeing me without makeup. I laughed. Out loud. Because what else do you do when your 6-year career vanishes like a missed text? The elevator didn't take me up. The Slack channels didn't load. My Outlook redirected to a deactivation message that read like a breakup letter, written by ChatGPT. I stood there in the lobby of Orion Group's Menlo Park headquarters, wearing a blazer that still smelled like the airspace lounge, and realized I was done. Fired. No warning, no call, no exit interview. Just a restructure notification sent to a work email I could no longer access. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I want to know who else is awake with me in this strange hour. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. My dad always said our family was good at looking presidential, neatly pressed, well-spoken, the kind of people who return shopping carts and bake for PTA fundraisers. What he didn't say, but I learned on my own, is that sometimes appearances are just armor. And sometimes your job becomes the armor, especially when you're the one they call at 9:47 p.m. to fix a diplomatic phrase or walk back a senator's gaffe or explain why joking about Area 51 at a defense contractor's gala might not be hilarious. I was good at that. Better than good. I was fluent in policy nuance micro-expression reading and the exact temperature to serve oolong when introducing a weapons systems trial to a DoD liaison. I never missed a beat until the morning I did. By 8:00 a.m., the company portal was a tombstone. I tried calling legal. Voicemail. Tried HR, got some chirpy hold music about employee wellness and flexibility, followed by silence so thick I thought it might be deliberate. I left 2 messages. Then a third. Still nothing. At 9:16, I received a text from my colleague Lara in Strategic Ops. It just said, "I'm so sorry. This wasn't personal." And that's when it hit me, it never is. Not to them. They call it optimization, realignment, a pivot to agile diplomacy. To me, it was a blindside at 35,000 feet. I sat in the Hertz lot with a rental key I didn't remember requesting, a conference badge still pinned to my lapel, and an inbox full of calendar cancellations. And somewhere in the haze between shock and clarity, I realized something. I hadn't even packed up my desk. They'd erased me before my plane landed. 2 days later, Cameron Tate was trending on LinkedIn. There he was, VP of Strategy and Innovation, beige blazer, no socks loafers, that looked like they belonged in a yacht club starter pack. His post read, "Thrilled to lead the next wave of GovTech diplomacy. Let's bring some vibes to DC." Underneath, our CEO, Jeff Sutton, had commented, "Proud of you, Cam. Take us there." That emoji thumbs up made me want to drive my rental car into the nearest redwood. I hadn't even fully unpacked the sad canvas duffel I'd lugged from DC. Still had Senate folders mixed in with airport trail mix, and already the new prince had taken the throne I didn't know was vacant. Cameron was everything I wasn't. Or maybe everything I had spent my career avoiding. He was loud where I was precise, charming where I was deliberate. He called national security a brand category, and once referred to bipartisan compromise as content overlap. He didn't know the difference between a continuing resolution and a classified annex, but he had a podcast mic in his carry-on. I watched from my couch as he made the rounds. Day 1 coffee selfie with the team outside Titan Corps' Northern Virginia satellite office. Day 2, a grainy Insta story of him shaking hands with someone in camo, captioned, "Grateful," inspired, "Humble AF." Day 3, he did a 2-minute walk and talk outside the Capitol, describing the Orion Titan Core partnership as cross-platform trust acceleration, like he was pitching a dating app for drones. That was supposed to be me. I'd spent 6 years threading that needle, navigating DoD bureaucracy, PAC donors, ethics compliance, and the kinds of senators who still think TikTok is a clock sound. I'd translated defense jargon into investor language, smoothed egos, and poured drinks in just the right ratios at just the right events. And now, Cameron, fresh from a 6-month fellowship at some think tank sponsored by Patagonia and Blue Apron, was leading our nation's most sensitive merger. I got a DM from Lana, one of the junior comms associates I mentored last year. She didn't say much, just, "I thought you were leading the gala dinner. This doesn't feel right." It didn't. But what was I supposed to do? Walk back in with my badge deactivated and say, "Hey, I'm the adult in the room you forgot you needed." No one called to explain. Not Jeff. Not legal. Not even Mia from events, who once cried in my office over getting uninvited to a NATO cocktail hour. The silence was surgical. I ordered Thai food spilled red curry on my old Orion sweatshirt and watched Cameron interview a retired Navy admiral on YouTube. He nodded a lot, said game changer 4 times, laughed like he understood when the admiral joked about satellite orbital decay, which he definitely didn't. And then he said this: "Our goal here isn't to maintain tradition, it's to disrupt it. Old diplomacy is dead. This is about vibes and velocity." I paused the video, rewound it, played it again. Old diplomacy is dead. I stared at that line like it was a tombstone with my name on it. Because here's the thing, diplomacy isn't dead. It's just quiet. It's the silence before the toast, the pause before the handshake, the way you phrase a question to make it sound like an offer. And Cameron? He didn't speak silence. I went back to the office. Not officially, of course. I didn't have access. But I parked across the street and stared at the building, like it might cough up an explanation if I stared hard enough. I was still wearing my lanyard from the last DC conference out of habit. The name badge with my tiny grayscale photo, Ava Collins, Senior Liaison Federal Affairs, looked pathetic now, like a souvenir from a country that no longer existed. Through the tinted glass, I could see the ghost of my old desk. Same potted snake plant, same framed quote from Madeleine Albright that I'd taped to my monitor. Diplomacy is not a zero-sum game. That plant had survived 3 CFO resignations and a blackout during a Q3 town hall. But now the desk was cleared. My bamboo pen holder gone. My annotated org chart, the one with color codes for influence lines, missing. The worst part wasn't what I could see, it was what I couldn't. When I tried logging into my Orion-issued laptop from home the night before, the system said account not found. My Google workspace dead. Slack channels gone. My training documentation, the internal wiki I'd built from scratch, over 6 years, translating federal contracting language into digestible best practices for our commercial team, had been archived and then wiped. I texted Laura. Did they delete the wiki? She responded, all legacy tools decommissioned by new strategy rollout. Cam's orders. Legacy. That was the word they used, like I was a dial-up modem or a flip phone. They didn't just replace me, they unpersoned me. Even the interns I used to mentor were quiet. Ava, who probably off doing policy consulting or some other grown-up thing. Nobody wanted to acknowledge I'd been cast out mid-project like a scratched whiteboard. I opened my closet, stared at the navy suits, the pearl earrings, the pumps that had carried me across defense expos and trade compliance hearings. None of them made sense anymore. I felt like a method actor after the role had ended still in costume, but the camera was off. That afternoon, I tried calling Jeff Sutton's assistant. Voicemail. I called legal again. Then HR. I left a 4th message. Then a 5th. I got one of those automated wellness check links in response need support. We're here for you. Try our guided resilience meditation. They ghosted me and gave me a mood board. That night, I drank the last of the sock I'd been saving for when the merger closed. The bottle had a gold ribbon around the neck, gifted to me by a Titan Core exec after I'd gotten a multi-million-dollar pilot program into the budget without raising flags. I took a photo of it half empty and almost posted it with the caption, "Cheers to being expendable." Instead, I stared at Cameron's latest post. It was a selfie in front of the Capitol steps, him throwing up a peace sign with the caption, "Trust isn't given, it's hacked. Let's ride." I laughed so hard I almost dropped my phone. Because hacking trust is exactly what he was doing, and he had no idea the code he was rewriting came with landmines. But still, no one called. No one asked if I was okay. And I realized that wasn't an oversight. That was the plan. It was 1:47 a.m. when my phone buzzed. Not a LinkedIn ping or another recruitment spam for AI policy jobs I didn't want. This was different. An old-school text followed by a signal notification. From Miles Grant, Senior VP Government Strategy at Titancore, the man who once corrected a senator's misused acronym mid-hearing with the finesse of a jazz musician. Miles didn't text. He called. And when he didn't call, he sent folded corner policy decks in courier font PDFs. So this message, it made me sit up fast. Hey, sorry for the hour. Heard what happened. Can we talk unofficially? My hands shook. I stared at the message like it might disappear. For a second, I didn't move. Then I typed back, I'm up. The signal call came 30 seconds later. I didn't even get to say hello before Miles jumped in voice low scratchy, like he was calling from a bunker in Arizona. Cameron's creating confusion on our side. No one's clear who's driving the merger. There's no structure, no prep. His language is concerning. I almost laughed. Yeah, that's one word for it. Miles sighed. Look, I'm not reaching out on behalf of the board. This is just me, informally, off record. But if you're willing to advise, consult, whatever the term is, we could use clarity, not politics. Context. My heart beat harder. My mouth went dry. I wasn't sure what shocked me more, that someone still wanted my insight, or that they needed it badly enough to break protocol at 2 a.m. I pictured him in some air-conditioned Titancore suite papers, spread across a desk, trying to salvage dignity from a pile of Cameron's LinkedIn captions. I didn't answer right away. Part of me still felt loyal to Orion. I'd built my career there, trained half their federal team. But they'd tossed me out like a broken fax machine while I was still in the air. And now they had Cameron using vibes in a Pentagon email. Another part of me, a sharper, colder part, felt something else. Not rage, not even revenge. Leverage! I took a breath and said, what would that look like? Miles was cautious. Some quiet briefings, tone translation, a few emails. No attribution, no footprint. Tone translation. That's what they were calling it. Not sabotage, not betrayal. Perspective. I thought about the gala scripts I'd helped ghostwrite, the cross-department security guide I'd built, the memo I'd sent HR last fall warning against casual language in defense diplomacy settings, especially with contractors like Titancore. Nobody read it then. Now they were begging for it in whispers. I said yes, not with some grand plan, just a quiet, clean yes, like clicking accept on a calendar invite. And just like that, I became the ghost in the deal I was supposed to lead. Not a hero, not a villain, just a voice in the dark trying to keep the pieces from cracking. Miles sent one last message before signing off. We'll call it back-channel advising. You still know where the landmines are. I typed back, let's hope Cameron doesn't step on all of them before I can warn you. I wish I could say Cameron's missteps were subtle, like slight cracks in an ice shelf. But no, his errors were loud, chaotic, and came wrapped in Canva templates. The first one hit 3 days after Miles and I started our back channel. It was a GIF, yes, a literal GIF embedded in a slide Cameron presented to Titancore's executive team during a Vision Sync meeting. The slide's title, Where Diplomacy Meets Disruption. The GIF Keanu Reeves saying you're breathtaking in Comic Sans. Miles sent me a screen grab with just 3 words, help us, please. I responded with a single period. Because what else could I say? Then came the rooftop selfie. Cameron had gone to Titancore's HQ in Scottsdale and convinced someone to take a photo of him doing finger guns next to a prototype armored drone. His caption, these wings were made for more than war. Defense vibes. Skybound innovation. You could practically hear the sound of every government compliance officer flinching in unison. By the end of that week, he'd posted 4 more times. One from a virtual town hall, where he called policy experts the real influencers of tomorrow. Another from an espresso bar in D.C., claiming he'd just brokered trust over cold brew. He was treating national security like a startup demo day, like trust could be scaled with the right podcast mic and enough ring lights. I quietly messaged Miles, If he uses the phrase peace tech again, I might file an ethics complaint myself. Miles replied with a skull emoji, and he called a 4-star general my guy during a panel. I was half laughing, half screaming into my pillow. Still, I did my part. I reviewed drafts of Cameron's public statements, reworded them for tone, flagged phrases that sounded flippant, advised on what not to say during a classified site tour. He ignored half of it. One morning, I watched a clip of him referring to Senate budget briefings as corporate speed dating. In the background, you could see Titan Corps' legal counsel blink 6 times in a row, like he was sending Morse code for help. And then, the cherry on the idiotic sundae, Cameron decided to launch a branded campaign called Merge Mode Activated. It included a hashtag, a Spotify playlist, and what he called a culture kit for post-bureaucratic collaboration. Inside it, a QR code that linked to a Notion page featuring memes of SpongeBob and tactical gear. I didn't make that up. I couldn't. One of the Titan Corps interns I used to mentor emailed me directly, subject line SOS. In the body, "We're losing them, Ava." They think we're mocking them. And they were right. Because Cameron didn't understand one thing: defense culture is not a vibe. It's not about being cool or funny or brand savvy. It's about precision, continuity, trust, earned in silence and kept in small nods. The merger wasn't just financial, it was sacred, and he was defiling it with every glib tweet. I closed my laptop that night and stared at the ceiling, wondering how far this had to fall before someone realized what they'd done. Spoiler, not much farther. The next move would break something that couldn't be patched. The ceremonial dinner was supposed to be a rite, not a celebration, not a press op, but a sacred passage. I'd attended a dozen like it. You don't host one until both parties are aligned, not just legally, but spiritually. Every seat, every fork placement, every wine pour was a message. The fact that they let Cameron host it made my stomach knot so tight I couldn't finish my tea that morning. I wasn't invited, of course. I wouldn't have gone. But I still knew it was happening. 7:30 p.m. Sharp hosted in the Titan Corps Dome Room, the one with the star-shaped skylight and acoustic panels meant to reflect warmth. I pictured the brass nameplates, the brushed navy linen, the subtle hum of string quartet ambiance. Then, I pictured Cameron in a linen suit, doing jazz hands, and had to sit down. May, a junior liaison from Titan Corps, who I once coached through a nightmare Q&A back in 21, sent me a message: "He's here. It's starting." I didn't reply. Just wrapped myself in a throw blanket and stared at my phone. 10 minutes in, another message. He brought a DJ. A DJ. Not a playlist. A man with turntables. I blinked. May followed up, called it a mood elevator. At 8:19 she sent, "He just made a joke about military cosplay." I didn't breathe for a full minute. At 8:26 she added, misquoted the Constitution. Called it the pursuit of hustle and happiness. I set my tea down, afraid my hands would shake it onto the rug. But the worst came at 8:42 in the form of a photo. No caption, just an image. Cameron front and center, flashing a wide, toothy grin, throwing up a peace sign, palm inward, surrounded by a rigid Titan Corps delegation who looked like they'd been photoshopped next to a war crime. Palm inward. A tiny detail. In the UK, in certain military circles, in older guard environments, that's not peace. That's a middle finger. Especially in formal contexts. Especially at events like these. I messaged May, "Did anyone tell him?" She replied 20 minutes later. "Dinner's ending early." After that silence, nothing more. No group selfies, no follow-ups, no recap posts. I checked Titan Corps' press schedule. The joint announcement slated for the following morning was pulled offline. Back on Cameron's feed, the recap read like a parody: "Incredible night. Unity. Innovation. Feeling the future. Force merge mode activated." But I knew what that tone really was. I'd used it. It's the language you deploy when you're scrambling to outrun fallout. When you've lit something on fire and are trying to act like the smoke is incense. By midnight, I'd gotten pings from 3 separate sources, 2 inside Titan Corps, 1 from a defense subcommittee staffer. All said the same thing in their own ways: the deal was off track. Nobody was saying it outright, but the wires were going cold. Cameron had done something no software patch could fix. He'd insulted a room without even realizing it, because he didn't understand the room was a language. And now silence was the reply. It started with a whisper: We are pausing communications for now. That was the official line from Titan Core. Not angry, not accusatory, just quiet. Like a curtain being drawn in the middle of a sentence. Cameron was still posting like nothing had happened, like his DJ stunt had landed him a TED Talk, and not a black mark on federal trust. But underneath it was unraveling. May didn't text again. Miles didn't call. Not right away. Even my back-channel threads went still. It was like everyone had simultaneously agreed, let's hold our breath and see if this dies fast or burns long. Meanwhile, Orion panicked. Internal channels started muttering about compliance turbulence and optics recalibration. Someone floated the phrase geostrategic friction as if the problem was foreign interference and not the human grenade we sent into a gala. The board held a series of emergency meetings. One EVP told a reporter off the record that maybe Titan Core was never serious to begin with. But I knew better, and I had receipts. I opened a folder I'd kept buried in a private drive, the one labeled, "If They Ever Come Back." It wasn't revenge porn, it was proof. Policy briefs, memo drafts, slide decks I'd sent to Legal to Strategy, to Jeff Sutton himself, each warning against casual tone in high-risk environments. One titled, "Avoiding Slang and Symbolic Gestures in Sensitive Government Settings." Another, "Merger Rituals, What Not to Joke About." They hadn't just ignored me. They'd purged me and recycled the errors like hand-me-downs. So I reached out to someone who owed me, Leo Harper, reporter for The Hill. We'd met at a post-briefing wine bar back when I was still idealistic enough to believe in off-the-record sincerity. I'd saved him from accidentally printing a misquote that would have buried his source. He never forgot. I sent him a zip file redacted what needed redacting. Told him to do what he wanted with it, but to tell the truth. He replied within an hour. 2 days later, the piece dropped. How a hashtag sank $1 billion merger inside the emoji diplomacy collapse. It didn't name me, but anyone who'd ever sat in a policy room with me knew. The article quoted anonymous insiders, referenced blurred group photos. It even mentioned a senior former liaison who had authored internal documents warning about cultural missteps months in advance. The internet smelled blood. LinkedIn turned into a war zone. One post read, "Diplomacy isn't a meme." Another, "Stop hiring brand mascots to run national affairs." My favorite was a viral comment under Cameron's latest post, just one sentence. "Peace signs don't cover war crimes, buddy." Orion's stock dropped 8% that day, then 12% the next. Investors started pulling out. Slowly at first, then all at once. The board began eating itself alive behind closed doors. Strategy blamed comms. Comms blamed Jeff. Jeff stopped replying to messages. And Brad sorry Cameron was nowhere to be found. His socials went dark. His team stopped responding to journalists. Merge mode activated disappeared overnight. I didn't gloat. I drank my tea, refreshed the article 3 times, and whispered something only I would understand. I told you silence wasn't weakness. The call came at 10:32 a.m. on a Tuesday. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of folding laundry, trying to pretend I had a normal life with normal routines, like shirts that got ironed and coffee mugs that matched. But something in me said, "Pick up," so I did. "Ava," the voice said, and I instantly recognized it. Jeff Sutton, the CEO, the man who once introduced me at an all-hands as the woman who makes DC not hate us, then ghosted me into oblivion. There was a long pause. I didn't say a word. "I saw the article," he said. Silence again. I imagined him in his glass office sleeves, rolled up for optics, looking at a stock ticker like it might bite. "I think it's clear there were missteps. On our end. With Cameron. And the deal, well, obviously it's at risk now. The board is shaken. We need to stabilize. And, well, we were wondering if you might consult. Temporarily. Just to help us recalibrate messaging with Titan Core." I almost laughed. Almost. "You fired me in transit," I said. "No notice. No closure. Not even a courtesy call. You let a TikTok tactician walk into a sacred partnership and treat it like a lifestyle brand." "I know," he said quickly. "You mattered more than we realized." I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the sunlight slicing across my floor, and said the thing I knew would unspool him too late. Titan Core already offered me a seat. Silence again. "You," what his voice cracked. They offered me a permanent consulting role, lead advisor global expansion and federal relations. I accepted, full access, name on the org chart and everything. That's a conflict of interest, he said, panic barely contained. No, Jeff, that's leverage. I hung up. 2 hours later, I got the official offer letter from Titan Core. Bilingual formatting, crisp, respectful, no fluff, no emoji, no gifs. The kind of document you frame if you're sentimental or burn ceremonially if you're not. I read it twice, didn't even bother negotiating. The stipend alone dwarfed my last Orion bonus. They didn't want a mascot. They wanted memory. Wanted someone who could read a Pentagon coffee order like a tea leaf. Someone who knew which senators used eye contact as strategy and which needed translation mid-meeting without knowing it. The part that got me wasn't the title. It wasn't even the back pay. It was the sentence in Miles' cover note. We want to make sure you're never the shadow in the room again. I didn't cry, but something inside me softened. A little. I packed a week later. Left the blazer that still smelled like betrayal in a donation pile. Took the snake plant with me, it had outlasted regimes and deserved better light. As I closed the door to my old apartment, I remembered something Cameron once said in a media coaching session. In the new era, no bowing required. And I thought, no, Cam. Some rooms still require a bow. The boardroom looked the same, but the power inside it had shifted like tectonic plates. Same polished walnut table, same subtle scent of eucalyptus oil pumped through the vents. But this time, I wasn't seated in a corner with a legal pad. I walked through the double glass doors with a new badge, new title, and a placard that said, Ava Collins, Senior Advisor, Government Relations, Titan Core Holdings. No one clapped, no one smiled, but every face stayed up when I entered. Jeff Sutton sat at the far end, his suit's slightly wrinkled collar curled like he'd slept in it. He looked like a man trying to hold a parachute shut in a wind tunnel. I nodded in his direction. He didn't nod back. Miles was already seated to my left. Cool, calm, silent. He gave me the tiniest glance of approval, just enough to say, you're not a guest here. You're furniture now. The meeting opened with quarterly losses, investor fallout, unplanned transitions in strategic leadership. They used phrases like uncertain visibility and pivot realignment, but no one mentioned Cameron, not directly, because by then he was already gone. The official statement said he'd resigned to pursue new opportunities. What it meant was we shoved him out the airlock before someone with subpoena power started asking questions. Midway through the update, Jeff tried to speak, cleared his throat, opened his mouth like he wanted to remind everyone he was still the captain, but the chairman cut him off. We appreciate your service, Jeff. We've reviewed your transition letter. Let's proceed. Jeff blinked. No one else looked at him. No one stopped him as he stood, slowly gathered his things, and left the room without a word. The door clicked shut behind him. No one even reached for the bagel platter. There was no ceremony, no farewell speech. Just a vacuum where his authority used to live. When I was fired, no one blinked. No one said, wait, what about Ava? Now, the silence around Jeff's exit felt colder, deeper. They weren't just replacing a leader. They were cauterizing a wound. After he left the room, exhaled. Not relief exactly, just inevitability. Like everyone had finally admitted the thing they didn't want to say out loud, they bet on a vibe when they should have bet on a backbone. The chairman turned to me. Ava, we'd like your assessment on reestablishing trust with federal partners and what timeline we need to earn it back. I took a sip of water. Let the silence stretch, not to be dramatic, but to remind them I was no longer operating from a place of panic. I was measured. I was choice. I'll need full access to the original decks, the correspondence Cameron sent to DoD liaisons, and the gala guest list. Done, the chairman said. Anything else? I looked around the room. Made eye contact with every exec who had once reduced me to a support function, a quiet fix in heels. Yes, I said. From this point forward, all communications involving federal departments get reviewed by someone who's read the actual OMB budget. Miles smiled into his coffee. They all nodded. This time, they didn't just hear me. They listened. 3 weeks later, I found myself in the same Titan Core suite where Cameron once snapped a selfie with a stealth drone. The room looked different now. No mood lighting, no beanbags or vinyl decals about disrupting legacy infrastructure. Just a polished table, a few understated flower arrangements, and chairs where people actually listened. A junior staffer handed me a fresh cup of jasmine green tea. Same blend I used to carry in my travel thermos. Funny how things come full circle. I sipped slowly and waited for the delegation to arrive. Not to impress them, not to translate for someone else, but because this time I was leading. Across the glass wall, I could see a new generation of associates shuffling briefing folders, quietly practicing introductions. They weren't influencers. They weren't podcast hosts. They were policy analysts who knew how to read between lines and stay silent when it mattered. That was the shift. Not flash, not noise, but respect. As the doors opened, I stood, greeted the visiting delegation from the Department of Commerce with 2 firm nods and a quiet, deliberate welcome. We didn't need hashtags. We didn't need GIFs. We just needed clarity. And after the meeting, after the quiet, successful handshake and the mutually understood pause before the signature, I walked back to my office. My office. Not a borrowed cubicle, not a side channel. They'd put my name on the frosted glass. No fanfare. Just clean serif letters. Ava Collins. Later that night, I received one last message from a former Orion intern. It was simple. We've been watching. You made it look like poetry. I didn't reply. Just smiled and took another sip of tea. Because revenge doesn't have to be cruel. Sometimes it just has to be correct. Sometimes it's watching the room that exiled you rearrange itself around your absence, only to find you at the head of the table when they come crawling back. Sometimes it's letting your silence echo longer than their noise. And sometimes it's this sitting in a high-rise, no rage left in your chest. No point to prove, just a contract on the table, a pen in your hand, and the full knowledge that you were never the liability. You were the blueprint. The deal was back on, with new terms, with new leadership. And this time, no one misquoted the Constitution. No one played music. No one threw up a peace sign. We signed the agreement with ink and respect, with eye contact, with the kind of stillness that says, we learned. And I finally exhaled, because I'd made it back, not as an accessory, not as a whisper, but as a force. Turns out in some rooms revenge is best served politely, with tea and a contract. Have you ever been erased professionally, personally, or culturally, and had to find your way back without burning the place down? That was me. I went from being silenced in a system I helped build to quietly reclaiming my place in it, without yelling, without gloating, just proving what they forgot, that the quiet ones carry the blueprint. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop your story in the comments. When were you the ghost who came back stronger? If you felt that shift in your chest, take a second to like, subscribe, and maybe send this to someone who needs to be reminded they're not crazy. Just early. We don't always get justice with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in a soft voice, a steel spine, and a document with your name on it. Thank you for listening. I'm Ava Collins. Until next time, stay sharp and stay kind.